Coach, thank you so very much for joining us here on the Warm Down Pool. I'm really excited to talk with you. I've seen all the great things that are happening out at Colorado Mesa. We talked a little bit off air about that gorgeous facility that you guys have out there. And I definitely wanted to talk about your journey through coaching, because you've worked with some great ones, going all the way back to Pete Accardy, if I'm saying that right. And I remember that because I swam Division II at Ashland University, and I know Cal State Northridge back in the day, winning some national titles under him. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, it's my honor. I'm really excited to talk with you. It'll be fun. And thank you for bringing up Pete. He's somebody I think about every day. And I can't begin to express how lucky I was to meet him at the time that I did. You know, I was a young aspiring coach, 1989, just finished college, and I was a high school teacher applying for graduate assistantships. And Cal State Northridge had one available. And Pete said, come meet me. Find a way to come meet me. So I drove 1989 to the NCAAs. They were in Buffalo, New York, to be with Pete and the Northridge team. And that was the first time I met him. It's probably before your time. I say I'm maybe saw you swim, but
I didn't get to Ashland until fall of 93.
Date you there.
Oh, no, we're good, Coach. We're good.
But that investment and being there with him, he was the Division II Coach of the Decade, won 13 NCAA championships, and I think every day about trying to win one here in his honor. So yeah, I've been around some great people, and Pete, he was just so generous to me and gave me a place to live and a way to make a living and taught me so much. Sent me to the racetrack in the summer to Del Mar and be with the trainers and watch them coach the horses. And what was so interesting is the horses, there's these amazing athletes, but they can't speak. So observation became a really important part of the process and has really informed my coaching. You know, that summer I spent down there with those trainers, it really helped me to be more alert, more aware, to watch better and kind of get a sense of how the athletes were doing by how they were moving.
You think about Division II swimming back in the 80s and the early 90s. Some amazing coaches have come out of there. Pete Accardy being one of them with Cal State Northridge. Ernie McGlisco at Cal State Bakersfield.
Big rival. I knew you were mentioning him. And then Ernie, I think, went to Chico after.
I think it was
Chico before or after Bakersfield.
It was Chico, then Bakersfield, because he was at Bakersfield when I was still there. And then you had Pete Hovland at Oakland.
He's still doing it. All right, he might have just retired, I think.
Just retired. I know his assistant coach is taking over for him, but man, that is a legacy. They haven't lost a conference championship under Pete's watch. Yeah. So just the names that are there, and those are some big names in the coaching world. And you don't think about that so much outside of the Power Five now, but the Division III level, you had Jim Steen at Kenyon, who was building his legacy there. And then that turned into Greg Perini at Denison. And I think people sleep on some of these, I keep saying lower division, but I'll say other divisions. And Brian Reynolds, who's obviously at Drury now, they were NAIA and dominating at the time. So, and you had Simon Frazier, which was an amazing program at the NAIA level. And we can go on about whoever's come out of Indian River for years, but I think people sleep on some of the great success stories that have come out of Division II, Division III, NAIA, and NJCAA, and we tend to focus so much on D1, and that's so wide ranging because you have the Power Five, you've got the mid-major, and you think about how great, I know how you were at West Point, and I know how great Navy is and the battles they have in the Patriot League, but we're still seeing higher levels of swimming even there. So I think people tend to sleep on that. And Pete Accardy that's a name that I remember when early on in coaching, and I never had the honor of meeting him, but he was legendary. There was so many good things. And I heard him speak I think he was at Central States. He was or a World Clinic, one of the two. And I was just fascinated because, again, one of those things, like you said, you were at Del Mar studying how to coach horses. And that nonverbal communication translates so much to our sport because water in the ear and you're trying to get information to kids quickly without going into great detail. It's not like basketball where you stop a play and you can talk for 10 minutes. Swimming, we got our intervals. We got to get these kids moving. So that's just awesome to hear how you're able to take something from a different realm altogether, but it's still coaching and how to apply it to your sport.
It was a great education. Let me just say, because I don't want to lose this point.
Oh, no problem.
In athletics in America, right, there's this perception that Division I is the pinnacle,
right,
which in some sense it is, and that everything else is less than. And people have this idea, I think, because of football, basketball, some of the bigger sports, right? If you're the 135th team, if you're the worst team in Division I, you're still better than the best football team in Division II. And swimming is different, right? You can go on the swim cloud and you can compare Colorado Mesa University with any other program in the country and know who's better. And this misperception, Eric, it's something that we deal with every day, and these kids that have this idea, well, if I don't put a Division I school on my Instagram profile, then people are going to think lesser of me, and breaking that myth, shattering that idea that it's less than is it's really important. When our guy Ben Sampson went 139, 200 back, was ranked number 2 in the country for some weeks, and people would say number 2 in Division II. No, number 2 and
overall.
That's in swimming. That's a pretty cool thing. My only disappointment compared to the way it used to be is that we used to get to go to the Division I NCAAs.
I was going to bring that up.
And that, like, if we could just bring that little piece back, it would really make a big difference. And you had to win. If you won, then you could go to Division I's, and it was like sort of advancing. And that was cool.
It wasn't even our sport that kind of, I don't want to say screwed that up. It was a couple of years ago where I think it was the early 90s when they did away with that. Jim Bourne was fabulous at the Division III level. I think he was the first guy to break 44. At the D3 level, and had he not missed a flip turn, he might have won Division I nationals that year because he destroyed Division III. It was actually college wrestling because they used to take the Division II wrestlers up, and I think it was Pittsburgh State, which is in Kansas. They, don't quote me, I'm gonna have to look this up, but they had a heavyweight that won Division I nationals 3 straight years, and that was embarrassing. The Iowa States, and all those Oklahoma States. So that's where it got shut down. But if you look at like track and field and wrestling, you've got elite level athletes, and swimming. I remember Ben Michelson back in the day at Southern Connecticut State was putting up.
His brother Drew.
Okay,
I know Ben really well. Ben enlisted in the Army, or Drew and Ben enlisted in the Army.
Yes.
So we used to let him come and swim in our alumni meet at West Point because he was technically in the Army. But man, that guy, I think he broke 50 fly on a couple occasions. He was a good swimmer. Yep.
There were just so many elite level athletes at the Division II, Division III, and NAIA levels. And head coach at University of Minnesota, Kelly Kramer, I think it was the 1992 Olympic trials, was the only NAIA Division II or Division III swimmer to qualify, and he did it in the 100 backstroke. So we've had great athletes come through, and obviously now they're Division I, but Queens was constantly putting up top 10 times and at the division or all division level. You guys have had some great swims as well, and Nova Southeastern this year for the women has several. So I really love that. I'm a product of Division II. I loved my time at Ashland University, and I love the opportunities that afforded. We were the first ones that did the 4-day meet. I loved that because I was a 200 flyer and a 200 backstroker, and they're on different days. So it made my life so much simpler. And the only negative is I had to be in the same conference with Oakland every year. So I had to take on Pete. My senior year was Oakland's last year in Division II. So we've seen a lot of growth in D2, and I know we've lost some schools, but just seeing other teams step up, especially like yours at Colorado Mesa, since you've gotten there, and I think it was the fall of 2019, correct? Was that your first season there?
Yeah.
So
right
you get
before COVID.
I was going to say you got your first year under your belt, and welcome to the.
We're day 2 of NCAA's, and COVID was just starting.
Yep.
And went in for finals. After day 1, they said no spectators for the next day. So it was weird, right? We kind of got used to it after a while. And then we drove back for finals Thursday night, and they wouldn't let us in. They said, "Here's your banner. Go home. See you next year." And yeah.
Did they officially, that's the question I've always wondered. Did they officially crown a national champion that year, or did they just say, because I know McKendree was leading on the men, but they never actually made it to finals that second day, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I don't think they ever champion. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm supposed to talk to Jimmy Tierney at some point, so I'll get him on and ask him that question. But I know we had our national championships the week before, and we were on the pool deck, and you started hearing about things starting to shut down. And okay, what is this? And is this just an overglorified flu? What was going to happen? And then the next week, of course, I'm a swim nerd, so I'm watching the live stream of day one of D2 Nationals, and I think there was something else going on, and I'm just like, okay, this is great. And then you started hearing the world shutting down all around it, and they canceled the meet in the midway through. Fast forward that to the fall. You've gotten through there. We're in the heart of the pandemic. What were some things that you really had to adapt to in your coaching and your training and working with your athletes, that when you looked at it, you're like, oh my God, I think all of us were like, how are we going to do this? But how were you able to overcome a lot of that? And what's some things that positively you took away from it?
Well, we're so lucky, like you mentioned, to have this big, beautiful pool, right? So when you have 23 lanes, you can socially distance and reasonably explain to your administrators that that's what we're doing. I think we were pretty fortunate because we're out in Western Colorado, and it's a little bit more, I don't want to call it rural, but sort of remote. We're kind of midway between Denver and Salt Lake City, and there just was slow getting here, right? There weren't a lot of cases, so we were able to kind of roll slow and do most of what we wanted to do and not be affected by it. And it's a pretty conservative place. In other words, how weird is it, right, Eric? How this disease or this illness became a political thing.
Right.
But fortunately for us, we were on the right side of the politics in terms of them letting us do what we wanted to do, and sort of a libertarian mindset of, you make your choices, right? Mm-hmm. You want to go up to Vail and go on that half pipe and put your life at risk on those mountains. You're allowed to do that. If you want to go and compete in athletics and you're willing to accept the risk, do that. So we're pretty fortunate with that.
That's awesome. I know for us in Eastern Kentucky, definitely more conservative, but we also had a president that had the mindset of, let's make sure we're taking all the proper precautions. Let's make sure we're doing everything right. And again, another one of those, you want to go hang out in Lexington or Knoxville or Cincinnati, because we're right on I-75. Go for it, but understand that there were going to be protocols that you were going to have to go through if you tested positive. And we were able to do a lot of the social distancing. And I will say, I will never get tired of people when they complain about having to clean stuff. I'm like, I had to disinfect an entire pool every single day. Like, calm down that you have to do laundry, kids.
Yeah.
But
our president, the guy who built this pool, is a swimmer. And so he was going to make sure he could get in that pool every day. So that helped too.
Definitely. When you were looking to make the move, you were obviously at West Point for many years, had a lot of success there. When you were making the move from there, what were some of the things that drew you to Colorado Mesa? I mean, the pool would hook me, but I'm a facilities guy, so I love any kind of aquatic center. But what were some of the intangibles and just the things about Colorado Mesa University that really stuck with you and said, I think I can do something special there?
Yeah. Well, that facility was certainly a big draw. Swim Swam says it's one of the 10 best in the country. And so it's a great place to come to work every day. The guy who built the pool, the guy that I just mentioned, President Tim Foster, he created a vision and an idea that we could create something really special here. And so that was a big draw, to have a leader, to have an inspiring person in the forefront, kind of recruiting me. I thought a lot about my days with Pete, and wanting to honor his legacy and try to create a winning championship program here at Colorado Mesa. Also, I was looking for a place to settle down. West Point was unbelievable, and we had an amazing 13. The job came with a house, but it was time for us to own our own place and put down some roots in a community where we wanted to be. And we like the West. We love the mountains. I'm a mountain biker and a snowboarder and a hiker. And, this really fit everything we were looking for. Plus, I have 4 children and they were getting ready to go to college and they weren't going to go to West Point. Although one of my boys is doing ROTC at Syracuse and he'll be a great Army officer, but they make it pretty affordable for the faculty and staff to send their children here. So it just kind of worked out. Feel really lucky.
First day, you're sitting in the chair at Mesa. You're the Mavericks head coach. What are your goals right off the bat? What are the things that you're focused in on about building this program? They had a solid program, obviously in the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference. Won conference this past year. Have taken home numerous titles. Finished. It was 4th with the men and 5th with the women this year. Correct, or do I have that reversed? Other way.
Yeah. We're like your team. The women are always a little better than the guys, at least so far. It seems like your teams are that way too.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I've just always been that way. But when you were sitting in that chair, what were your thoughts? How did you envision the program going and what were some goals that you had?
I think the most important thing that we do as coaches is we pick the people that are going to be on our team. Right. And that to me was okay. I'm here now. I'm in a different place. Who are my people? Who are the swimmers, the divers, the student athletes that could represent this place well? And so getting a sense of who we're the Mavericks, right? We're a little rough around the edges. We're blue collar kind of a place. And it's that sort of a school. And so getting a little bit more clarity on who are the right people that I need to bring here, creating the right environment for them. If you have the right people and you can create the right, and it's a cliche term, but the right culture so that what matters the most, what are the things that we pay attention to? How do we make decisions, right? That's our culture, was building something that we could be proud of and taking care of people, taking care of the kids that were on the team then. One of the things that's been really a lot of fun is the number of international student athletes that I get to work with. And obviously at Army, it's all American. And when I was at University of Washington, we had some of that, but I just fell in love with these Egyptians and kids from all these different countries. The American dream is real, and people really value that opportunity to come and be part of something. So it was picking the right people, creating the right culture, and taking care of everybody. I would say that's what we do. That's our main job as coaches.
That's awesome too. I think that's something I've really grown to appreciate coaching at Cumberland's is I have a diverse group of athletes from across the U.S., across the globe, and learning not just about their backgrounds in swimming, but their cultures as well and how that integrates with one another. I have kids from all over, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's hard and not in a bad way. And I have 2 athletes who are Ukrainian right now. Their families are displaced due to the war. And it really makes me as a coach take a step back and say, I'm just a monkey with a stopwatch. These kids are literally going through being displaced from their homeland. I need to put things in better perspective, and that maybe things aren't nearly as bad for me as I think they are. And understanding that there's more that I can give to these athletes. We literally before nationals last year, I had a young lady, her mother and her brother were escaping across the border into Moldova to go to her grandmother's, and the war is breaking out and she's trying to get ready for nationals. And
that puts things in perspective.
No doubt about it. Like you're sitting there as a coach and you're like, trying to figure out who's going to be on the 200 freestyle relay really doesn't matter when you're finding out that one of your athletes can't go home.
Yeah.
So I think I've gotten a much better understanding of athletes, but there's still a lot that I can learn. And that kind of leads me into my next question. I've been coaching for 30 years at different levels. I started when I was 18. You've been involved in the game a while as well. What are some things that you've seen that have changed in terms of the athletes over that time? I'm going to ask about coaching in general in a little bit, but what are you seeing from athletes that have changed since your time back with Pete at Cal State Northridge to fast forward to 2023? at the at Colorado Mesa University?
It's a great question, Eric. And someone asked me this recently, so I'm just going to recycle the answer because it felt
Perfect.
right. I think kids will still swim through a wall for you, right? They still are tough. They still are loyal. They still want to do whatever's necessary to be successful, but they want to know why. They want to understand the process. So I think the biggest thing I do now is I explain, this is what we're doing and this is why, and some days it's full-blown physiology lectures on the whiteboard of, this is aerobic base and these are the steps along the way and this is how we're going to do it, and creating analogies. We use the climbing Everest analogy of base camps, and I like climbing and mountaineering. But I think that's the biggest difference is I don't really assume anything. We have a meeting before practice every day, and I explain this is what we're doing today, and this is why. And then we have a meeting after practice, quick team time. This is how we did, and we do shout outs, and then what's next. And I think that level of consistent communication is something that kids crave and something they want a little bit more of. And the one thing I'll never do as well in terms of team culture is ignore anything, right? Everything matters. Everything's important. And we address stuff. We talk about stuff every week. Every Thursday, we sit down as a team and we talk about issues and things that are going on. Not my issues, team, and I think, like you said, I'm just a monkey with the stopwatch, but I think that those kind of things really help. But they're the same. The three things that I need for someone to be happy in my program is, number one, they got to love swimming, right? Can't coach desire. I can't make them do the absurd amount of work that's required to be any good in this crazy sport. Number two, they got to believe in team, to value the idea of being part of something larger than themselves, and family type people. That's my first question with recruits. Tell me about your family and what do you guys do? How would you describe who you guys are as a group? I love watching, especially a young boy or a young man interact with his mother, because that's going to tell me a lot about the way he'll treat his teammates and my staff, and his coaches. And then thirdly, they got to be a little bit tough. And I'll just ask them, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? How would your teammates describe you? How do you typically respond in a very difficult practice? Because like I said, we're the Mavericks. We're going to work hard, and I'm going to make them race every day. That's something that if you were to ask me what is a characteristic that's enabled our women's team, for example, to go from unranked to our first year 16th, and then the second year 12th, and then the third year 5th, and then this year 4th, it's the Red Queen effect. Right? The Red Queen, it's a reference to Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
But it's also an ecological principle. And there's so much great stuff on the internet about the Red Queen. But just, basically in the redwood forest, right, as the giant sequoia grows, all the trees around it must grow for survival, right? To compete for sunlight and oxygen and photosynthesis and all this. As the hare gets faster, so must the fox get faster, or it's going to starve. And so we create matchups and competitive opportunities in practice every day that really make a big difference. When we went our 716.1 and had 4 girls break 150, they went 149 for the first time ever. It looked like practice, but just looked like them, what they do every day. And if you can compete fiercely and lovingly in practice every day and create an environment where it's okay to fail, where it's not cutthroat, where that's sort of valued, then I think a lot of success can come from it.
I love what you said there at the beginning about this generation of athlete, their curiosity. Because, one of the things that I have discovered about myself as a coach, again, I'm from a time where yardage, don't question anything, do as I say, not as I do. I was coached by boomers and I'm Gen X. So yeah, that's kind of how it always worked out. But what I am discovering is that kids have this curiosity. And when they ask you why you're doing what you're doing, it can be a little off-putting if you're not used to it. And I've realized as a coach, I've got to open up more. They're not asking to be malicious. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they really want to tell you how to do your job, but I'm sure that happens to everybody at some point. But when they've got the world at their fingertips on their phone like this, they can get on there and they can find out anything they want within seconds. So they're going to want to know, why are we doing this test set? Or why are we doing this on this day at this point of the season? And I think as a coach, I need to evolve more and be more open. So I love the fact that you're able to do that with your athletes, because unfortunately, there's some coaches out there that they're really stuck in their ways. And I have taken a lot of knowledge from younger coaches and their ability to engage with athletes and their creativity and try to apply it to what I do. But man, I love the fact that you're meeting with your athletes on a regular basis, before a practice, after a practice, talking about why we're doing what we're doing, because I think there has to be a high level of engagement. And I think that's something we've been missing here at Cumberland's. And I think that's something a lot of coaches can take away for their programs, not just at the college level, but at the high school and the club level. The communication with our athletes now and building those relationships is so important, because I think this last 2 years of the pandemic, athletes now, they're craving that, because it's been denied from them, those social interactions. I also blame social media for their sometimes awkwardness, but these kids are Gen Z and they're our children. I have two of them who grew up in my house, so I understand what social awkwardness is. So I've really enjoyed talking with coaches and athletes and hearing that they're engaging more with their athletes, because they again, those kids just want information. So that's really cool to hear. When you're putting together your plan, and obviously you've been at Mesa for 4 years now. When you're looking to plan out a season, when does that process begin for you? I know for me as a coach, I pretty much take the month of May off. I just take some time to myself. I might do some recruiting, but when June hits, man, I'm writing down on legal pads, because I'm old school that way. I'm scribbling ideas, not just about my training and how the season's going to look, but what are we going to be doing for team activities? So walk me through your process at Colorado Mesa and how you're setting up your next season.
I'm a visual person, and I'm a little bit challenged technically, although I try, right? And the only way to learn is to just immerse yourself in it and do it. But I use a wall calendar, and I start with the end, and then I work backwards. So we have it's right here, but it starts with Olympic trials, and then national championship, conference championship, and then every step along the way. And so I start with a giant wall calendar that I love and color code it by event. So if it's a swimming event, it's in red. If it's an academic event, it's in blue. If it's a personal thing, like my daughter's graduation from college next week, it's in orange. And then all of our training cycles are in green. So that's how I start. And I really like to have a good literal picture of what the year is going to look like. And then we just start to fill in the blanks, right? This is my 32nd year as a collegiate head coach. So I've done this 32 times and I know what matters most to me, right? I know what matters in my program. You mentioned Jim Steen earlier, and I'm just going to reflect on something.
Love Jim Steen.
Love him. When I got my first head coaching job, University of California, Santa Cruz in 1992, Division III.
Banana slugs.
The slugs. I called Jim Steen. And I said, Coach, I introduced myself, and I said, my goal is to beat you one day. What would you do if you were me? And he spent over an hour on the phone with me, and it created a lifelong friendship. So much so that we're still in touch to this day. And,
wow.
And I think I earned his respect by being bold enough to say, I'm going to beat you. And he couldn't have been more gracious with his time and just laid it all out for me. This is what I would do if I were you. So the one real passionate thing I have about coaching is mentorship and trying to give back to young coaches. And that's why I immediately agreed to do this, because if one person sees this and gets something out of it, I was just so blessed to have people like Pete Accardy and Jim Steen Dave Alexander and Sam, just so many people that have made a huge difference in my life.
I think that's critical right now. And obviously I'm on the board, and you have been on the board with the CSCAA and the mentorship program that Jean Fleck of Fresno State. She is huge on that, and I'm a huge supporter of it. Young coaches right now, from what I'm seeing, and I've said this on numerous podcasts that I've talked about with other coaches, they have such great ideas, but unfortunately, I think a lot of them will flame out in our sport early on because they're afraid to reach out to coaches and ask questions. In the NAIA, we talked off air. I'm the old guy. I'm the one they come to ask questions about the entry, or we have a brand new selection process that's very similar to Division II and Division III now. They want to know how to go about things. I actually had a coach said, how do I guarantee that I'm going to have relays and nationals? And I spent 45 minutes explaining to him, like, I know you got limited resources, but I also know your administration's not asking you to have a big roster. Here's what I would do if I were you. Mm-hmm. And one coach said, you're literally giving us the blueprint on how to beat you. And I go, yeah, but you don't think I'm going to adapt to you now? You don't think I know this is coming?
Bring it on.
Exactly. It just makes us better as coaches. I think more and more, if we're able to mentor coaches and help educate them, not just in the X's and the O's or writing workouts, because we all have different ways of doing it. John Urbanchik is huge on the color chart system. Dave Salo hasn't written a workout down on a piece of paper in 20 years, I don't think, but his whiteboard is always full. These are guys that have different ways of getting to the same level of success. And I don't think it's the X's and O's that is what we have to worry about. It's understanding that when we sit in the big chair, like you're in yours right now, mine's at my office, there is so much more to coaching than just being on the pool deck. It's budget meetings. It's making sure your academics are in line. And I was lucky. I spent 3 years at the University of Nevada, and a lot of things, I didn't have to worry about equipment. I didn't have to worry about academics. I had to worry about recruiting and coaching as an assistant. It was amazing.
Brendan? Was Brendan?
I know. I was there with Mike Richmond right after Mike Schrader had left. So there had been a couple coaches in between. Neil Harper took over before Brendan, and then Abby Scatiti, who had gone on to Northwestern, was there right after Mike. So I realized sitting in this big chair, there's so much responsibility that kids, younger coaches, I call them kids because that's what they are to me, they don't realize. And I think that's where the ability to reach out or listen to a podcast like this and say, okay, I can contact Mickey Wender at Colorado Mesa. I can contact Adam Epstein at Kaiser University and talk with them. And we're nerds about this sport. We could talk about it forever. Right. I mean, my wife's in the other room going, he's doing what he loves.
Yeah. The other thing too, Eric, is the lifestyle. It's how do you raise 4 children and stay married for 30 years and still have a career? How do you handle multiple athletic directors and administrators and changes? How do you handle difficult situations on your team if someone attempts suicide? Or, like there are real life things that we're all going to have to figure out, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. It's why I'm disappointed. I've been to the convention in a few years, but I wish I could be there. My daughter's graduating college next week, but just to talk to people that do what we do. That are living the same sort of life. That's priceless because it's a very unique lifestyle. It's been wonderful. And gosh, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's different. And these, like Sam Freeze, who we all know, and some of us love him and some of us don't, but he could not have been more generous with me, with his time. And I could go on and on about Sam, but we need mentors and we need to seek them out. It's really important.
I had the pleasure. So 4 years, Sam was with Oklahoma Baptist. He started the program there.
Yeah, I thought about that when I was looking at NAIA. Yeah.
My first 4 years in the NAIA, where Sam was there, and he was polarizing. And I was at the University of Nevada, where he had been at Hawaii, and there was actually a section of the rule book that we call the Sam Freeze rules. So those were interesting to read. Sam was definitely someone who thought outside the box, but he wasn't afraid to sit down and talk with you. I remember him coming over to me, goes, Coach, I'm looking at your team right now. You're on the right track. You've got athletes. And he and I never really had a meaningful conversation to that point, but he took time out of his day and during a meet, which he was winning a national title. And I think we were like 7th, but he said, you're doing the right things. Your kids look great in the water. I went down and I spent a couple days with him. This was right after they had announced they were transitioning to Division II. And I just picked his brain about sprinting because that's always been an Achilles heel of mine. I was a distance swimmer. I was an IMer. And to hear him talk and to hear him think, it was a completely different paradigm that I wasn't used to, but he did it in a way where he wasn't condescending. He wanted to know what you were doing with your sprinters and said, hey, maybe instead of this, why don't you try this? Maybe instead of doing this, or, hey, I really like, he said it. He's like, I love what you're doing with that. I'm taking that. I'm stealing that. And I appreciate that. I'd never considered Sam a mentor. I considered him a friend. There have been guys Bill Dorincott at Ohio State. Bill was my first college coach at Ashland University. Just talked with him the other day. He said, if you ever need anything, feel free. Next time you come through Columbus, let's go get a bite to eat. Let's talk swimming. Paul Graham, who had been at Cleveland State, another guy I could lean on. And there's some club coaches early in my career. And there were some that they saw me when I was younger and went, okay, this kid's out of control. He's going to go down the wrong rabbit hole. Let's bring him along for the ride. And I'm so grateful to this day for that. And I think more coaches need to do that. And I'm hoping this is a median in which it spurs not just young coaches to reach out, but some older coaches to kind of look and say, hey, the kid's doing something over there. Why don't you just congratulate him and see what happens? Because I think that will spur some great conversations. It's going to spur some rivalries. We all want to win. We all want to beat up on each other. Adam Epstein down at Kaiser University, I say, dude, I love you except for 4 days out of the year when we're at nationals. And other than that, I want to step on your throat and keep my foot on it. But when I had a kid, we had a young man go 144 in the 200 backstroke and won NAIAs and broke our national championships. And I beat his kid who went 145 and broke the same record. He was the first guy to walk over to me and congratulate me. And I said, well, he's the one who did all the work. I just stood there. But at the same time, having those relationships, and I've had coaches who have said, how have you balanced your work life? How have you been able to balance your personal life and work? And how have you stayed sane with it? And I go, I haven't. And I've literally told coaches, here are my mistakes. Here's what I have done wrong. And the biggest mistake I will always say is early on in my career, I was so competitive. I was so driven. I didn't make the right kind of time for my sons, let alone for my wife, who I'm still making it up to, and I will to the day I die. It's one of those where I will tell coaches with young children, you don't have to always be at that morning practice. That's what you got an assistant coach for. Make your kids oatmeal. Take your kids to school. They're going to remember that.
Go to morning practice and then go have lunch with them in the cafeteria.
Absolutely. Yeah. Make sure you're there for that soccer practice or National Honor Society induction. If you got to leave practice early for your kids and your athletes don't understand it, you got the wrong athletes or you've conveyed the wrong message. And like for me, Halloween is my holiday. I will skip a whole day of practices to set up for Halloween. I'm that guy. I don't have any other hobbies. I have no other interests. I just love Halloween. But the athletes understand it's like, okay, he gives us time off. If we need personal time, if we're struggling with a class, we need academic help. That's his personal day. And my athletes understand that. Most of the time they want to come over to my house and see all the crazy stuff I've made or I've had.
You do like a haunted house kind of thing?
I do up my entire yard. Like I spent a week and a half on proper lighting in the yard. I've got probably 50 tombstones. And the amount of money I have spent on Halloween is
What do you have, a whole storage facility for all this stuff?
We literally bought a shed just for my Halloween stuff. So yes, that's my passion. That's my drive. Outside of swimming, that's what it is. But I've talked to a lot of young. Ironically, no. That's the one thing I don't do because I did it early on, and I would do scary stuff, and I would have little kids come up, and they were too terrified. And so now I just wear my University of the Cumberland's fleece. My wife will dress up, my kids will dress up, and I'll be standing there in jeans and a fleece pullover, and that's it. But I think young coaches need to hear you don't have to put in an 80-hour week and miss out on your own personal life and miss out on those moments, because there's many of us who have. And unfortunately, we know it. We've had a lot of our friends in the sport, they got divorced because the sport took over their life.
Or they're not in it anymore.
Exactly. That's the other one. They were given an ultimatum, and they were smart in that they took the family in that regard, but they've lost the sport in many ways. So I'm grateful that I have a wife that's understanding. She was not a swimmer, so she doesn't get the whole thing. I get 5 minutes when I'm at home to complain about what the swimmers did to drive me nuts. And after, she'll start my watch. She'll just go, and that's it. So I have a really good women's 500 to get it done. Yep. If I don't get it out by then, I'm out. I have to save it. And I've tried to bank. I was like, can I have 10 minutes tomorrow if I don't complain today? Nope. 5.5. It doesn't roll over. So one of the things that we talked a little bit about, changes with the athletes. One thing I want to talk with you about is, how have you seen coaching change over your career? Because I know for me as an athlete to when I am now as a coach, the evolution of our sport and training has been dramatic. And I remember 2008, 2009, the super suit will never break any of these records. And now we're shattering them. Talk to me about your thoughts on how coaching has evolved since your initial days at Northridge.
I want to get this right. I think there are certain things that we know work in coaching swimming, right? You build a bigger motor, you're going to have a faster athlete, right? If you can improve technique and their underwater and their ability to streamline, you're going to have a faster swimmer. So I guess, Eric, I think I'm more willing to individualize things, to be creative, to personalize the training for the athletes, and trust that I know what's going to work for them, more so than maybe I was as a younger coach who you just don't know, right? And you think you know, but then once you've been through it and you screw things up, and I've made every mistake I could possibly make, but I haven't made the same one twice, I don't think. And so trusting my intuition, I'm sure I do more power work. I'm sure we're on the towers more. I know that I dedicate 3 hours every week to underwater for the underwater warriors. And that's a big part of what we do, and something that we've had a lot of success with. I think we probably kick more now than we used to. And we race a lot. And you got to do the work. These people, I don't see ultra short race pace training working very well in a collegiate environment, at least for me. And so I have my roots in tradition and what I know works. And then I'm more willing to be creative and flexible and personalize, individualize things as we.
One of the things that I heard from a coach, Bill Dorincott at Ohio State, I asked him, there was an infamous thing we did at Ashland, and we did it twice. We did it my freshman year, my sophomore year under Bill. We did a time 10,000. And I finally got him on the record as, why did you make us do that? And his response was, because I'm an idiot. He goes, when your only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And I love that quote. And he mentioned that in his career, he's added more tools. And with the advent or the usage more of power racks and power towers, and we were lucky at Ashland University, the power rack, which is Total Performance Incorporated, that's in Mansfield, Ohio. That was 20 minutes down the road from school. So we would get them. We had 6 of them at our school. That's cool. Probably cost us nothing. We were the guinea pigs, I swear. And so we got to use those a little bit more.
Sam Van Keur is a brilliant guy.
Oh, brilliant. And I know they were using them a ton down at Kenyon because he collaborated with Jim.
Yeah. Best friends. They still go on a major hiking expedition together every year, those two.
I heard the fishing trips with those two are just amazing because Jim loves just the outdoors in general. He is not, for a guy who's an amazing coach, he is not a sports guy. I've heard that from multiple people. And
he likes to walk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But training with the resistance stuff, with parachutes, resistance drag socks, all of this.
I'm going to steal that quote from Bill because that makes a lot of sense to me. We got a lot more tools and a lot more idea about how to use them interchangeably.
And I think that's the key, is that just because you can be a coach and you can have a full set of power towers and power racks and parachutes and drag socks, and you can strap a rocket to your back if you want to, but how are you going to implement that into your program and be efficient with it? Because I tell athletes all the time, I can put you on the towers for 2 hours, but we're going to get about 45 minutes in and your stroke is going to go to garbage and we're not going to catch water. You're going to fall apart. And now are we being efficient? So it's about taking these different tools and different implements and being able to incorporate them in. And I think USRPT has a place in certain areas of our program, but I don't think it's the end all be all. Yeah. At the same time, and I know he's done amazing things with distance swimmers, I'm not 100% bought in that John Urbanchik and the color chart system is the end all be all, because I think it negates sprinters from the equation. Having a sprinter do a T30.
It's a great way. You don't have to do the T30, but
Right.
I'm going to advocate for the colors right now, because I think having a common language that everybody understands, this is white, this is pink, this is red, this is why red is red, and then you get them in the exercise physiology lab and do a threshold test and see what it is. I just love the colors because everybody's speaking the same language.
Exactly.
80%, what do you mean 80%? 80% of what? Of your best time, of perceived effort, of a max heart rate, like colors. I'll always use them just because it gets everybody on the same page.
And I've taken a lot from Dave Salo.
Yeah.
Yes. I've taken a lot from Dave Salo. He's always talking about first, second, third, fourth gears. And that is just a different version of white, red, pink, all the different colors. And I've taken it even further. I have a background in cycling. Like, that is the sport that I love right now. I love my road bike. I'm in the Appalachian Mountains, which is a nightmare to climb because everything's switchbacks. And cycling is all about power and heart rate. And we've been able to implement that a little bit more into our swimming. And I would love to have heart rate monitors on everybody. I know it's not always feasible, but we use the old pulse plot test that I took from Dave, and he took it from somebody else. So we're all sharing ideas. I think that common language, and it goes back to communicating with your athletes. What is third gear? And I actually had a swimmer, I was explaining third, fourth, fifth gears. And in my mind, okay, this is the heart rate zone you should be in. It should be 70% of your max, 80% is this, whatever. And fourth gear to me is between 80 and 90% of your max heart rate, because that's the way we've kind of structured it based off our testing. I had a swimmer go, fourth gear is like 500 pace. No, then I thought to myself, wait, I never explained to my athletes. I just wrote it on a board. I didn't explain to them why we're doing this pulse plot test, why we're doing the results. I'm not even sharing those results the way I should.
That's another thing too, Eric. You need to have the same conversations over and over and over again. Even though you and I have been doing this 3 decades plus, they're still the same, sort of.
Right.
18 to 22-year-olds. And we can't quit having those conversations and make any assumptions that they've moved beyond it. They're still young people and trying to find their way and figure stuff out. And
well, we'll jump into our final segment right now, and I call it 650s on the top, and then we'll get you out of here for the day. This is a this or that kind of situation. So I'm going to throw out 2 things. I want it right off the top of your head. Pick one or the other. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. Ice cream or a milkshake?
Milkshake.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
iPad or laptop?
iPad. Do
you prefer a sunrise or a sunset?
Ooh, I'm awake. I love a good sunrise, but I think I'm going to stick with sunrise. And mostly at UC Santa Cruz, we were up on a bluff overlooking the Monterey Bay, Pacific Ocean, and we'd have the most spectacular sunrise every morning. And I still think back on those. And my daughters and I, we collect sunsets together. And so that's sort of a hobby with I have 2 girls and 2 boys. So the sunsets those are meaningful, but I don't know. They're both great. And I've seen the green flash. If you don't know what it is, look it up.
Yeah. For me, I lived in Reno, Nevada in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So I had a western facing back window and I would see the sunset over Mount Rose. So to me, that was the big one, is sunsets.
Yeah, I still on my deck, we overlook the Colorado National Monument and it's west facing. And so it's pretty spectacular.
Do you prefer a long course or short course?
Short course, power.
And the final one, PlayStation or Xbox?
I was never a video games guy. I had an Atari back in the day.
So did I.
I'm dating myself. I never really, it never caught on with me. So I had one of those little handheld ones too, a Coleco thing.
See,
I'm not much of a technology. I'm not much of a video games guy.
It's a PlayStation household here, just because my boys are big on it as well. Well, hey, Coach, I know you and I could probably talk forever on everything, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so very much for being on the Warm Down Pool. We'll catch up down the line. Hopefully, we'll see you at convention next year. If not, if I'm out in the West Coast in the Rockies, I'll definitely pop in and say hello.
Eric, please come on by. We'd love to see you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Have a country.
Have a great one.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.